Hello folks, today I'm taking a look at another set of fantasy terrain from Archon Studios. This time it's the Elven Woods set from their Dungeons and Lasers range. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at the Dungeons and Lasers Elven Woods terrain set. As you can see, it's a big one. And in it, you get enough to cover, what's that, 2x2, 3x3 maybe? We'll have a wee look-see in a minute. 3 oak, 3 pine, 3 of each of the hill/blocking terrain, and then 1 camp set for scatter. No models, no gaming mat, but you don't need those, you just need the terrain. There is a QR code for the online manual, so have a look at those in a minute, but comprehensive set. So let's take a look at the SPRUs. Alright, before we take a look at the SPRUs, it actually comes with a set of build instructions inside as well, so you don't need those online ones, which is nice. Pine tree, oak tree, and the fence and the tent. There's not a huge amount of build in this. Obviously a lot of the things are one piece, which we'll see in a moment. But it's quite nice. They have these numbered and color coded, depending on the sprue. So, how's that? Now, there are 3 sprues, green in color, for the blocking terrain/hills, reinforced on the back. So they are a sturdy set of figures or terrain pieces. So like I say, 3 of those. So you'll end up with 2, 4, 12 bits of blocking terrain/hills. They've all got nice variety of textures on them. Vines, creepers, undergrowth, rock, what have you. Take a closer look at those in a moment. Then we have 3 of these pine trees. Again, red plastic. Should be a relatively simple build. 2 halves of a trunk, base of the trunk, and then your foliage to go around it. Presumably these slot in around the trunk then, and I imagine they rotate as they go to mask this big gap. But we'll see when it comes to the build. And that's nice. You can actually see the pine cones in the foliage as well. What a delightful touch. No squirrels. Then we have our oak tree. Again, same sort of idea. Trunk into the stump of the tree, and then work your way up with the branches and leaves. All good texture on them, and nice clean casts. I wonder if this could be left or magnetized in some way so that you could have it as a felled tree stump, so you didn't have to have the tree on it all the time, or even for gameplay purposes, so you can lift off the tree if you've got a few of them grouped together and have people in amongst the stumpage. And our last one had a new colour. So we have our little camp set. So there are 3 wood sprues for the pine, 3 for the oak, 3 hills, a single campsite sprue. But again, we have some a fallen log, bit of scatter there with a sword laying up against it. We have our little palisade and fence, 2 tents, a couple of bedrolls, and a cooking fire, and what appears to be a set of animal skins being tanned or dried. So, most single-sided. Nice level of detail on them once again. The two tents are identical. So it's... No, they're not. They're not identical. I thought they were because I seen the shield leaning there and there. But here you can see a log with something on it. Could be an animal, could be a bit of something. On this side though, we have a log with a few stones. And oh no, it is the same. I thought it was a skull for a moment. My eyes are going. Right, we have two identical tents. Let's get everything built up and we'll take a closer look at them. All right, back and things are built. So this is the contents of the campsite sprue. Not a huge amount of building in here. The little log seats are all one piece. The campfire's one piece. The little fence, also single part. Drying rack, same, or I suppose tanning rack. So really all you're building in this are your tents. And then this little barricade, which is quite cute. Barricade is about 40 mil long, let's say 42 from tip to tip. And on the height, it is around 18 mil tall. So just a nice little scene. If you do use miniatures for RPGs, having a campsite's always handy. The tent comes up quite nicely. Obviously there's going to be the seam on it, nicely hidden on the front and rear from the folds of the tent. So that's out of the way. Is a little bit noticeable across the top, but again it's hides. So what are you going to do there? It is around 63, 62 mil at longest. And height wise, top of the tent is about 28 mil. And then the burb sitting on top adds another 5 to that. Again, nice detailing, quite chunky, thick. So if you're using washes, dry brushes or speed paints, it'll come out a treat in short order. Next up we have our hills / rocky terrain. So this is the largest, which is around 140 mil at the longest points and stands approximately 38 mil tall at the highest point, but it is stepped up. And despite all of this detail on it, it's got quite a low profile, as you can see there. So the detail will come out quite nicely when you come to do your painting, dry brushing, washes, whatever. But at the same time, you can quite happily stand somebody on it without any major issues. I just threw a little wandering knight on top from the Teutonics. So a 20 mil square, which is what you should be basing individual fantasy figures on, sits on that beautifully. And will get up and down quite easily. 25 mil might be a little bit more problematic. I do have one. So 25. No, I think in most cases, yeah, in most cases a 25 mil is okay as well. You might find a little bit of balancing required here, there, or everywhere. So we have the largest piece. There are then two smaller pieces. I like how they've done it so the rocks aren't straight up and down. Obviously getting flat or perpendicular cuts into a mold are quite difficult to pull out, so they always tend to have a bevel or an angle. And they've done this to give the rocks a bit more of a less repetitive, less angular shape. That's not the right word. You know what I mean though. It looks a bit more natural having angles cut in, rather than having just almost like dressed stonework or brickwork up and down. These little ones, although they're not a complete set, as in they don't perfectly mesh, they mesh well enough that you can set them side by side quite happily. And then we have our final long piece. And again, height and distance. So this one is again around 140. This is actually probably closer to 150 mil from end to end. And the two little ones around about 80 mil and 65 by 105. So a nice little collection of blocking pieces. Because you get 3 sprues, it means you've got 3 sets of these. So any small scale table can be sort of blocked off in short order. And when combined like that, again, it's not a complete hill, but it gives you a more substantial piece of terrain. So a lot of modularity. You can play around with these quite happily. So that just leaves the trees. So I was suggesting that potentially these could be magnetized, but they don't actually need to be. So the stumps interlock into the root system of this. And once they're down on the table and painted, that should blend quite nicely. They'll stand up even without the tree stump under them. So there is a good center of gravity, a good balance on it. And they've been really neatly put together in that regard. So, as you can see, oak tree a go-go. I've not glued these in yet. If I pop one out, set this out of the way. The sprue gates, main sprue gate was on the bottom of the branch. And then there were smaller sprue gates on some of the leaves here. So these are very easy to clip off because the leaves are quite arced. There's good detail on them, nice detailing on the branch, but no real overlap with the detail in the sprues. A little bit on the trunk. So there will be places where you'll need to remove or clean up the sprue gate from it. You can see possibly one in there. But otherwise, very simple to build and they look very effective. The big fir trees, pop one there. As you can see, very tall. I've not glued any of these on yet, on the grounds it may be easier to paint separately. So even these leaves will come off. With these, the sprue gates are a little more problematic. So if and it has the same structure of interlocking roots, which is just awesome. If I ease this out, so the detail on these leaves is a lot finer than these broad deciduous leaves, which have got very little on the way of actual detail on the outside edge, whereas these firs, as you can see, are all detail all the time, which means where we've got the sprue gates at the end, when you clip those off, you'll either have to cut them away with a knife or maybe a file, if you don't want to lose the actual texture of the edges of the needles from the fir tree itself. Now, it is just terrain. I'm sure a lot of people are just going, I'll just clip, and move on with my life. That's up to you. But yeah, the amount of detail they've put on this both upper and lower means there's no way they could put sprue gates on without it overlapping some detail. So it's on the edges. It is what it is. It's not difficult to remove. It's just going to be a little bit time consuming more than anything else. But overall, a really nice set of fantasy foliage, and the whole box essentially gives you a small table's worth. So any skirmish game, you're spot on for. Any RPG, you're good to go. And then as a basis for a bigger sort of massed battle or big table setup, it's a really solid step in that direction. So there we have it. All right, there we have it. Another gorgeous set of terrain for your tabletop. Excellent for games like Moonstone, the multi-award winning fantasy game. It has a very fantastical fantasy feel. So when you look at it, you've got the various bits and pieces in there that are sort of overgrown. You would expect to find it in Elven Forest, you know, trees, rocks covered in vines and flowers. But it has that same very whimsical fantasy feel that something like Moonstone has. Great for games of Warcry, Warhammer, Kings of War, anything like that where you need blocking and obstructing terrain as well, having hills. The fact it's all coloured means that you can bang it together out of the box. Very little assembly required for a lot of the stuff in there, just the trees really, and the tent. But it means you could get it down and playing immediately and then start actually painting it later on whenever you get a chance. So I like the coloured plastic base on it as well. But let me know what you think below, whether or not this is one you're going to be picking up yourselves. I think it's definitely worth a look if you're into your fantasy gaming. Until next time, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.